My name is John Militello. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a 6-year resident of Glen Ridge, and I'd like to thank you all for coming down to the Glen today so we can take a moment and pause and reflect on who we are and what kind of society we want to live in. And I wanted to thank you for taking this first step towards justice for all. We put this idea of a vigil out there less than 48 hours ago, and here we are. With a special thanks for Mother Diana Wilcox, who's here today. So now to why we are here. We are here to denounce racism, to acknowledge that there are two Americas when there should be one. That not only is racism real, but that we are disgusted by it. We are here to honor the memory of a man, George Floyd, who was senselessly murdered in the past week for the world to see. Another black man murdered at the hands of a society that continues to favor the voices of white individuals. Let us not forget about Christian Cooper, the bird watcher in Central Park, who could have easily become another statistic in that chain. Let us not pathologize the oppressed and ask them to stand down and make things better, but rather ask ourselves, what are we doing in our privileged positions to be an anti-racist? It starts with listening, and that's what the moment of silence and reflection is designed to do, to really hear the other voices and our inner voices, what it all means, but to hear our fellow Americans and our fellow humans. So stand up and be an anti-racist. Now I'd like to turn it over to the Chief of the Glen Ridge Police Department, Chief Sheila, for brief words. And then she'll turn it over to our mayor, Stuart Patrick, and then Pastor Jeff from the Glen Ridge Congregational Church, who will lead us into a 1 minute and 9-second silent reflection, 1 additional second for each minute George Floyd was pinned down by that police officer. In closing, my wife, Michelle Militello, who's here, will read a poem written by Luz Alva Bullock, a fellow Ridger. Thank you all very much for coming up.
Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Chief Sheila Byron Lagatuda, and I'm proud to be here, serving the Glen Ridge community and any other persons that are here that want to share in this time with us. I'd also like to give a few shout outs. Mother Diana Wilcox has been not only a mentor to me at the police department, but from the moment she came into our community at the Christ Church, she has offered us assistance in all regards. I'd like to give a shout out to Sandra Lefkowitz, who is the president of the Glen Ridge Women's Club, but also the mom and the woman that I call for all things, because she's got her fingers on the pulse of Glen Ridge. She's able to assist me, she's candid, and we have a relationship where, well, I'll talk to Sandra about that later. I'd also like to thank Prosecutor Ted Stevens, who could not be here with us today. He's our Chief Law Enforcement Officer in the County of Essex, and Chief Mitchell McGuire, who's the Chief of the Essex County Prosecutor's Office. I'd like to thank John personally for allowing the police department to work together to bring a peaceful, timely, and important statement to our town. I would be remiss if I did not thank every member of the community who band together less than 2 weeks ago to participate in the memorial service of Sergeant Charles Roberts. The service has received, thank you. The service, much like this, was put together in less than 72 hours and has received accolades from across the country regarding distancing and being able to honor the fallen. It truly shows our residents' commitment to celebrating the life of a police officer who is the epitome of all things good in public safety. If Sergeant Roberts was with us today, he would be chanting the same message as we are. The horrific death of George Floyd has ignited a fierce response across our nation. This tragic event requires us again to unite as a community and stand up for the rights of all people, to speak out against acts of violence that took place in Minneapolis, which took the life of George Floyd from his family. The appalling actions of the officers involved only serve to contaminate and spread hate throughout our country and taint the remaining upstanding women and men of the law enforcement profession. I am not only a 39-year veteran of the Glen Police Department, but I've been serving this community for my entire career. I was raised in Glen Ridge, graduated from Glen Ridge High School, and my roots have been planted here. I'm committed not only to my department, but to this entire borough. I personally stand for justice and equality in all regards. We at the Glen Ridge Police Department and in the borough of Glen Ridge are committed to an arduous hiring process, and our officers are held to the highest of standards. Even the smallest infraction of my rules and regulations is met with firm discipline. My personal philosophy is one that confronts issues heads-on with an authoritarian leadership style. My personal philosophy is also that if minor rule infractions are not addressed, major disciplinary infractions will be very difficult to handle. I can speak not only for myself. I'm not just here speaking for myself today. I'm speaking for my command staff at the Glen Ridge Police Department, Captain Sean Quinn, Lieutenant Timothy Ferrando, Sergeant Dean Nardellis, but also as the president of the Essex County Chiefs of Police Association. I'm speaking for the 22 chiefs and directors within Essex. We stand with you. In the state of New Jersey, each department reports quarterly, biannually, and annually to our prosecutor's office in all regards. We complete ethnicity reports for each motor vehicle stop, including gender, race, and whether a summons or warning was issued. This report is attached to my monthly report, which is submitted to the police commissioner, Paul Lesovich, each month and is also a public document. In Glen Ridge, each officer on patrol wears a body-worn camera, which is activated anytime they have contact with the public. Each car on patrol is equipped with a car dash camera. A meaningful review investigation is done each time a use of force report is generated by a Glen Ridge police officer. All of our police officers in Glen Ridge participate in mandatory training classes in de-escalation, use of force, internal affairs, fair and impartial policing, and crisis intervention. We are committed to continually learning and evolving as a municipal police department. Myself and my command staff are committed to transparency, integrity, listening to our citizens, and working together to work harder and do better each and every day. I'm proud to serve the borough of Glen Ridge, and I'm certainly proud to be your police chief. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am very regretful that recent events have made it necessary for us all to gather here this afternoon. So hopefully we'll all give it some thought. Okay. On behalf of the Borough Council, the administration, the police department. I want to assure everybody here that we are very, very committed to communications and to very, very strong relationship and partnership with our residents. And to that end, we in the police department have numerous programs and to keep and build the relationship between the police department and our residents, so that our residents are not afraid of our police department. They feel comfortable in talking to them about almost anything. I'll take a couple minutes here just to go through some of these programs that we have, which span very heavily our young people, because that's where you start to build relationships between your residents and your community. We have a lunch with a cop, where small groups of 6th and 7th, 3rd graders have lunch with an officer and get to know him or her on a social as well as a professional basis. That spills over into bike safety and things like that, where they feel comfortable going to an officer and getting their bikes tagged and everything. We educate them on a constant basis in the schools on safety. We have driver education for high school students, where we give them an ability to experience an ALCO test and things like that, so that they really begin to understand what is important to them about not driving and drinking. So I think I could go on and on, but I think through this, we build a mutual respect between our police and our officers. And I cannot remember a single incident in which we had any very big confrontation with any of our residents, let alone confrontations over racism or bias and that sort of thing. So I really believe that if you want to start resolving these problems, you've got to open communications, you've got to have communications, you've got to have an ability to discuss things. But if you close down and both sides go in opposite directions, we're not going to solve these problems. They're always going to be there. So I can only suggest that more towns get involved at a very early age with their children, with their residents, and try to build that strong bond of trust and an ability to communicate. Thank you.
My name is Reverend Jeff Mansfield. I'm the senior pastor at Glen Congregational Church just up the street. I want to thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to speak up here and for asking me to speak. I just want to invite you all to join me. A very simple statement of moral truth. Black lives matter.
Yeah.
Can you say it?
Black lives matter. Black lives matter. Black lives matter. Black lives matter. Black lives matter.
And because undeniable that Black Lives Matter, we can say without any doubt, if there needed to be any doubt in anyone's heart, that George Floyd's life matters. The murder of George Floyd is an incalculable loss. This was a man with a human being, a universe unto himself with all kinds of relationships, a son and a cousin and his family and his friends and his work and his community. But his murder and his death was so much more than the death of one man. It was an assault on so many of our neighbors, and an assault on the moral sensibilities of all of us, and an assault especially on the Black community in America. His death was not just about the feelings or the racism or whatever was happening inside the mind of that police officer who pinned him to the ground for 9 minutes. It is about system that has existed in our country for generations. And changing one mind at a time is possible, but it is very difficult to figure out how to root systemic racism out of our society and our culture and our lives. And I just want to share with you a small piece of wisdom from my tradition. Jesus tells a very short little parable in the Bible, and he says, there was once a widow. And widows in Jesus' time were the people who are at the very bottom rung of the social ladder, completely and totally disenfranchised from any kind of participation in society, in economics, in the economy of any kind, just totally disenfranchised and oppressed people. And Jesus says there is this woman who was a widow, disenfranchised and oppressed, who had a case in court. And every day she would go to the judge who was hearing her case, and she would plead for justice. And she would come back again and again and again and again. And finally one day that judge said, you know, I don't care about justice, and I don't care about people, but I'm going to have to change my mind and give this woman what she's looking for, or else she is going to wear me out by coming back over and over and over again. I think what Jesus was saying to anyone who would listen is that sometimes we need to be the widow. And in the face of systemic problems and injustices that seem way beyond us, we have to be willing to come back again and again and again and again. And the only way that we're going to be able to do that is if we do it together. So I want to say thank you to everyone who came out here to show support to your community and to honor George Floyd. And what we are going to do now is we are going to hold a moment of silence in honor of Mr. Floyd, to mourn his life and his death. And then we're going to add an additional 9 seconds onto that minute. 1 second for every minute that he was pinned to that street. 1 second for every minute that we all witnessed him murdered on the street. Message to us. Well, we need to take this minute and these 9 seconds to mourn and to find our center. And then we need to go out from here and we need to respond in one loud, unified voice that Black Lives matter. And police brutality will not be accepted in our communities or in our country. Someone has suggested to me that if you feel so moved, you may want to take a knee and kneel down or do something else to show your respect in this moment. And if you choose to do that and you are physically able, I invite you to do that. And we will observe 1 minute and 9 seconds of silence. Amen. God bless you. George Floyd.
Black lives matter. Black lives matter.
We came here today with a purpose. That we not only see the racism that exists, but that we can no longer just sit on the sidelines and say, well, I'm not racist. We have to take personal responsibility and action. That action starts. The following is a poem that was written by a fellow Glen Ridge resident, Luz Alva Bullock. Racism is taught. Speak up against racism every chance you get. For every brother and sister of color. For all the beautiful children of color. For justice. For change. Lives depend on it. We have a lot of work to do. Our humanity encompasses a beautiful tapestry of color, and we stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters. We see you, and we will continue to speak up for justice and liberty. Thank you.
All right, thank you all for coming out, and this concludes this vigil, but I am so deeply, deeply moved by the presence of so many residents of Glen Ridge and Montclair. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming out. Thank you so much.
city police officer.
Hey, man, the people came out today, man. Beautiful.